David Cullinane.
And first of all, I want to welcome the opportunity to have this debate here today. The Minister did lay before the House last week his report on extending the FEMPI legislation, and I've read that report with some detail. I've also juxtaposed that report with the Summer Economic Statement, and both of them make for very interesting reading, Minister. And the language that's used in the Summer Economic Statement contrasts very strongly with some of the language that's contained in your own speech here today, because, of course, you're speaking to two different audiences, and not just your language or the language that you use, but also the Minister for Finance. I've spoken to you directly on the issue of public sector pay on a number of occasions, and you know I have a very real interest in this issue, as has Chocta Colleary as well, and many people in this House. I met with the Secretary-General of your department to discuss a number of issues in relation to public sector pay, and I've spoken to some of the officials who are in the House here today as well, and all of them have been very helpful, may I say. One of the issues that we're trying to do is to cost returning to a single-tier pay structure in the public service. Last week, Minister, you said, or this week in the House, you said that you are now going to enter into discussions with some trade unions to try and bring that about, to try and bring about pay equalisation. I hope that the information that you get can be given to us as well, because when we're trying to cost this, we're being told the data doesn't exist. It's impossible because of different systems that are used by different departments to pay, and it's difficult to track where people will be at if you were to reverse the changes that were made. So it's interesting that the government is now going to at least pursue this issue, and the type of information that you as a government get, I hope that we in opposition will get the same information when that becomes available. Minister, if I can have your attention, the Minister for Finance, the Minister for Finance said in his speech and his remarks in relation to the Summer Economic Statement that the recovery is bedded in. And the recovery is bedded in when it suits them. So we're in full-on recovery, and that was the mantra of the government before the election. But today when you come in, you say in your speech, our economy is growing, but we are not out of danger. And then you go on to say, but we are not clear of all danger. And I accept that. I'm not saying that that's wrong. But you're only saying that in the context of wanting to retain FEMPI for as long as possible. I also want to make one thing clear, Minister. My party is not in favour of the immediate scrapping of FEMPI because of the cost that would be involved, and because those at the very top in our public sector would benefit very beneficially and in a very, very real and unfair way if that was done. What we want is a fair and timely unwinding of FEMPI. Can I give a number of examples, Minister? If FEMPI was to be unwound right here today, somebody on €25,000 a year would get €66 back. €66. Somebody on €30,000 would get €577. Somebody on €35,000 would get €1,752. And I think that they should, over time. Somebody on €185,000 a year would gain €53,000. Somebody on €150,000 would gain €35,000. So I'm not in favour of giving people on very large sums of money that level of pay restoration. What is interesting, though, is that in the Haddington Road Agreement, the cuts in pay that were imposed on those over 65,000 are being restored as part of the Lansdowne Road Agreement. There was a separate registered agreement, and again I discussed this with you. For those who earn between 65,000 and 110,000, they will have their pay restored in two elements. One on the 1st of April, April Fool's Day, in 2017, and then on the 1st of January in 2018. And that includes us as TDs. We get 4% and 4% and 8% pay restoration. Ministers of State will get more. The Taoiseach will get more again. Those on over 110,000 will get restoration in 3 stages. But for those under 65,000 that had their pay cut in 2010, no restoration. There is a €1,000 flat increase, which the Minister says is fair, but in reality, the big winners again in Lansdowne Road and Haddington Road are those on over 65,000 and those on over 110,000. So that's one of the reasons why I'm not going to support the immediate scrapping of FEMPI. What I think needs to happen is this, Minister. The emergency powers that the Minister gave himself and the previous ministers gave themselves in relation to public sector pay need to be repealed. The way forward is through negotiation. What we want is a negotiated unwinding of FEMPI, where the trade unions sit down with government and others to create a fair way and a timely way in which we can fully and faithfully unwind FEMPI. And as part of that, I think it would be reasonable for us to say that in that context, for all the reasons you said, Minister, about the problems in our public services, the need for money for health and housing and all of those issues as well, that we cannot pay people on over 100,000 and 150,000 more at this point in time. We have to prioritise, as Deputy Cullinane said, those on low and middle incomes. They have to be our absolute priority. The issue of pay equalisation, for me, is a red line issue. But what people need to understand, and some people don't, it is outside the terms of FEMPI. If FEMPI was scrapped, even if it was scrapped, it doesn't deal with that issue. That was brought in separately in 2010 because there was no need to do it through emergency legislation because there was new entrants, there was no contracts. And here's the sorry list, Minister, of FEMPI legislation that has been brought in and pay cuts that have been brought in since 2008. The first was a pay freeze in 2008, where workers were told you will have your pay frozen for that year, and in September 2009 you will get an increase of 2.5%. And of course, the 2.5% increase never came. But by God, what followed crucified many public sector workers. We had the pension-related deduction in March 2009, which is the PRD, the pension levy on public servants. We had comprehensive pay cuts for all public servants in January 2010. That was followed by the Croke Park Agreement, where we know, so-called productivity measures which were introduced, and also we had the new entrant level pay changes that were made as well. We had the Haddington Road Agreement. In between that, we also had the changes to the payments of existing retired public servants who also had their payments, their pensions cut as well. And then we had the Lansdowne Road Agreement. We had 5 separate pieces of FEMPI. We had 2 pay agreements. And all of that involves a lot of pain for those on low and middle incomes, Minister. And unfortunately, they haven't benefited. What's interesting, though, Minister, and I just make this point, you say that workers in the public service have to wait, that we can't afford to give them back money that was taken from them. And I'm talking about those on low and middle incomes here, because of potential dangers and external shocks and so on. But yet, at the same time, you say that the €5 billion in cuts that you announced are safe. Or maybe you're not saying that. Maybe they're now on the cards. What about the €3 billion you're putting away for a rainy day? Is that safe as well? So when it comes to these issues, they're safe, they can't be touched. We're going to give taxes back to those, again, people at the top who may not need it. That €5 billion is solid in terms of tax cuts. That €3 billion for a rainy day is solid, but that's going to be somehow shielded from the external shocks that you say are there and the dangers that you say are in existence. And then you use a whole set of different criteria to unwinding FEMPI. So what I can't understand, Minister, and what I can't get a sense of, and we had this discussion yesterday, is what is your plan? You don't seem to have a plan beyond 2018. For years 2019, 20 and 21, when in the Summer Economic Statement you set out your net fiscal space, there's no provision for public sector pay. And I know that you're going to enter into discussions and you have the commission that will be set up and all the rest of it. But at least give us an indication that you see, could you at least tell us today, Minister, that for those 3 years you see some sort of agreement in place that will involve further unwinding of FEMPI? At least then we would know there is going to be progress. And up to now, you have not at least even given us that assurance. And that's what I want to know. Finally, Minister, a lot of people called for a debate on this issue. I don't see the spokesperson for the Labour Party here. There's not enough people in this chamber for a very, very important debate on public sector pay. People were jumping up and down about this last week. No, you're here. I'm saying there's a lot of people who are not here, some parties who are not represented in their parties who are. I'm saying there's a lot of people who are not here. So for that reason, I want to call a quorum.
You want to call a quorum, Deputy?
Please.
Quorum, then is called.